Zekthar stood at the airlock door of the human ship called Spirit of Liberty and felt his forearms twitch with doubt. The metal walls looked rough and simple compared to the smooth crystal surfaces of Kathrani warships. Everything about this vessel seemed crude and hastily built. The humans had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago, while his people had been warriors for over 1,000 years. The airlock opened with a loud hiss, and Zekthar stepped inside. The first human he saw was tall with dark skin and wore a uniform that looked more like work clothes than proper military dress. The human smiled and held out his hand. "Captain Jake Morrison," the human said. "Welcome aboard." Zekthar touched the human's hand briefly, as was their custom. The captain's grip was firm, but not aggressive. Behind Morrison stood 3 other humans. A woman with brown hair, tied back in a simple knot, wore the uniform of a tactical officer. Her name tag read Rodriguez. Next to her was a thick-built man, with scars on his hands who looked like he had seen many battles. His tag said Parker. The third human was a woman in medical whites with short blonde hair. Her tag read Grant. "We know why you are here," Morrison said as he led Zekthar through corridors that smelled of metal and oil. "The Void Swarm is coming to New Eden, and we need to stop them." Zekthar had read the reports about the Void Swarm. They were creatures that ate entire worlds and left nothing behind but empty space. His own people had fought them before and barely survived. The creatures were fast and smart and felt no fear or pain. They simply consumed everything in their path. "How many ships do you have?" Zekthar asked. 12, Morrison replied. "Plus your fleet makes it 20 total." Zekthar felt his confidence drop. 20 ships against a void swarm was not nearly enough. His people usually needed at least 50 ships to fight a small swarm, but the humans seemed calm about it. They walked through their ship like they were going to work in a factory. Bridge was small and cramped. Humans sat at stations that looked like they had been built by hand. Rodriguez stood at a table covered with star charts and spoke in a voice that never changed tone. "Void Swarm fleet detected at the edge of the system," she said. "Estimated arrival at New Eden in 6 hours. Enemy count is 47 vessels of various sizes." Morrison nodded, like she had told him the weather. Zekthar felt his chest tighten. 47 void ships was a massive swarm. They would need at least 100 ships to have any chance. "What is the evacuation status?" Morrison asked. "Transport ships are loading civilians now," Parker said from his station. 3 million people. On New Eden. We can maybe get half of them out before the swarm arrives. 3 million people. Zekthar had never been in a battle where so many lives were at risk. His own battles had been fought over empty space or small outposts. But these humans talked about it like they were discussing cargo shipments. Dr. Grant turned to face them. "Medical facilities are ready for casualties. I have prepared for heavy losses." The way she said it made Zekthar uncomfortable. She spoke about death like it was just another part of the job. In Kathrani culture, warriors honored the dead with songs and ceremonies. These humans seemed to treat death like paperwork. "Take us to New Eden," Morrison ordered full speed. Ship jumped to hyperspace, and Zekthar felt the familiar twist in his stomach. But something was different about human hyperspace travel. It felt rougher and more violent than Kathrani ships. Everything about human technology seemed to be built for power rather than comfort. As they traveled, Morrison showed Zekthar around the ship. The humans had weapons that Zekthar had never seen before. Projectile guns that fired metal slugs at incredible speed. Chemical explosives that could blow holes in ship hulls. Flamethrowers that shot burning liquid. "These weapons are primitive," Zekthar said. "Maybe." Morrison replied, "But they work." The human Marines were practicing combat drills in the cargo bay. Zekthar watched them move and noticed something strange. They were not the biggest or strongest. warriors he had ever seen. Many were smaller than Kethrani soldiers, but they moved with a steady purpose that reminded him of machines. One Marine was a young woman who looked like she should be in school rather than preparing for war. Her name tag said Johnson. She was cleaning a rifle with movements that were precise and careful. When she noticed Zekthar watching, she smiled. "First time fighting with humans?" she asked. "Yes," Zekthar replied. "You will learn things today," Johnson said, and went back to her rifle. Zekthar spent the rest of the journey studying. The humans. They did not sing war songs or perform battle rituals like his people did. Instead, they checked their equipment and talked quietly about their families. Some wrote letters on small computers. Others slept peacefully even though they were flying. Toward certain death, the ship dropped out of hyperspace and alarms began to sound. Through the windows, Zekthar could see New Eden burning. The beautiful blue and green world was already covered in black smoke. Void ships swarmed around the planet, like insects around rotting meat. "Evacuation ships are under attack," Rodriguez reported. "They will not escape without cover." Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, and his voice remained completely calm. "All ships engage the enemy. Priority is protecting the evacuation transports. Do not let any void ships reach them." The spirit of liberty turned toward the battle, and Zekthar felt the deck shake as the weapons powered up. Around them, the other human ships did the same. The Kethrani vessels took positions behind the human fleet. Zekthar expected the humans to show some fear now that they could see the enemy. The void swarm was terrifying to look at. Their ships were black and twisted like diseased organs. They moved in ways that hurt to watch. But the humans just did their jobs. "Enemy ships closing fast," Rodriguez said. "Fire when ready," Morrison ordered. The first shots lit up space between the fleets. Human weapons were loud and bright compared to the silent energy beams that Kethrani ships used. But they seemed to hurt the void ships just as well. A void ship broke through the human line and headed straight for an evacuation transport full of civilians. Morrison did not hesitate. "Parker, take your Marines and board that ship," he ordered. "Stop it before it reaches the transport." Parker gathered his soldiers and ran toward the shuttle bay. Zekthar decided to follow them. He wanted to see how humans fought up close. The shuttle flew through space filled with laser fire and explosions. Void ships shot at them with weapons that seemed alive. But the human pilot flew steady and calm like he was driving to the store. They attached to the void ship and cut through the hull. The inside of the enemy vessel was dark and smelled like death. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors. Zekthar had fought void creatures before and knew they were coming. Parker led his Marines into the darkness without fear. When the first void creature appeared, it was exactly as horrible as Zekthar remembered. 8 feet tall with too many arms and a mouth full of teeth that moved like snakes. It screamed with a sound that made most warriors freeze in terror, but the humans just started shooting. The void creature charged at the human Marines with claws that could cut through metal. Zekthar expected the humans to fall back and regroup like any sensible warrior would do. Instead, they spread out and kept firing their weapons. The bullets tore chunks from the creature's body, but it kept coming. Parker threw something small and round at the creature's feet. The explosion knocked it down and covered the walls with black blood. But more creatures were coming from deeper. In the ship, Zekthar could hear them moving in the darkness ahead. "Johnson, take point," Parker ordered. "Lewis, cover the rear." The young woman Zekthar had met earlier moved to the front of the group. She held her rifle ready and walked forward, like she was taking a stroll in a park. Behind them, a thick man named Lewis watched for enemies coming from behind. They moved through the void ship, and Zekthar noticed something that disturbed him. The humans were not afraid. When a void creature jumped out of a wall, Johnson shot it without even changing her expression. When Lewis was grabbed by tentacles that tried to drag him into a hole, he calmly cut them off with a knife and kept walking. Zekthar had fought alongside many different species over the years. All of them showed fear when facing the void swarm. Their voices would shake, and their movements would become jerky and desperate. But these humans acted like they were fighting training dummies instead of nightmare creatures from space. They reached the bridge of the void ship and found 3 creatures working at controls that looked like they were made from bones. The creatures turned to face the humans and screamed their terrible war cry. Johnson and 2 other Marines opened fire while Parker threw more explosives. The fight was over in seconds. The void creatures lay dead on the floor, and the humans were already working to shut down the ship's weapons. Zekthar watched Johnson check the bodies to make sure they were really dead. She moved the barrel of her gun and fired once into each creature's head. "Always double tap," she said to Zekthar. "Dead things sometimes get back up." They destroyed the ship's controls and returned to their shuttle. As they flew back to the Spirit of Liberty, Zekthar tried to understand what he had seen. The humans had fought perfectly. No wasted movement and no hesitation. But there was something cold about it that made him uncomfortable. Back on the human ship, the battle was getting worse. More void ships had arrived, and the evacuation transports were still trying to escape. Zekthar went to the bridge and found Morrison studying the tactical display. "We are losing," Rodriguez reported. 3 evacuation ships destroyed. "Enemy reinforcements arriving every hour." Morrison nodded, but his face showed no emotion. "How many civilians left on the planet?" "Approximately 1.5 million, Dr. Grant said from her station. The others are either evacuated or dead. She said it like she was reading numbers from a supply report. Zekthar felt sick. 1.5 million people were going to die, and this human woman talked about it like inventory. "Sir," Parker said as he returned to the bridge, "enemy boarding parties are trying to take our ships." The Kethrani vessel. "Thunder of Stars is under attack," Morrison turned to Zekthar. "We need to help your people. Can you fight in zero gravity?" Zekthar nodded. His people were trained for all types of combat. They took another shuttle and flew to the Kethrani ship. Zekthar could see holes blown in the hull where void creatures had forced their way inside. They entered through an airlock and found chaos. Kethrani warriors were fighting desperately against void creatures in the corridors. The artificial gravity was not working, so everyone was floating and spinning as they fought. It was hard to aim weapons, and many warriors were panicked. But the humans adapted immediately. They used the walls and ceiling to push themselves around like they had been born in space. Johnson grabbed onto a pipe and swung herself behind a void creature, then shot it in the back. Lewis used his heavy body to tackle creatures and pin them, while others shot them. Zekthar joined the fight and noticed that his own people were making mistakes. They were scared and firing wildly. Some were so terrified they could barely hold their weapons. But the humans moved through the battle like it was a dance they had practiced many times. A void creature grabbed Corporal Tony Lewis by the leg and started dragging him toward its mouth. Lewis did not scream or beg for help. Instead, he pulled the pin from a grenade and held it against the creature's body. The explosion killed them both, but saved 3 Kethrani warriors who had been trapped. Zekthar stared at the place where Lewis had been. The human had killed himself without hesitation to save strangers. There had been no drama or speeches. He had just done what needed to be done. "Keep moving," Johnson said, as she pushed past him. More coming. They fought their way to the bridge of the Kethrani ship and found the captain badly wounded. Void creatures had damaged the ship's life support, and the air was getting thin. The Kethrani crew was starting to panic. Parker took charge without asking permission. Johnson secured the engines, Rodriguez, get life support working. Grant, take care of the wounded. The humans spread out and started fixing the ship. They worked with tools from their packs and seemed to know exactly what to do. Dr. Grant treated Kethrani wounded with steady hands, even though alien blood was very different from human blood. How do you know how to fix our ships? Zekthar asked Parker. Ships are ships, Parker replied. The important parts are always the same. They got the Kethrani vessel working again and returned to the battle, but things were getting worse. More evacuation transports had been destroyed and void reinforcements kept arriving. The human fleet was taking heavy damage. Zekthar went back to the Spirit of Liberty and found Morrison in his ready room, staring at casualty reports. The human captain looked tired, but not defeated. We are going to lose, Zekthar said. Morrison looked up at him. Maybe, but we will make them pay for it. What do you mean? Morrison stood up and walked to a window that showed the battle outside. Void ships were everywhere now, and human vessels were exploding one by one. My people have a saying, Morrison said. If you are going to lose anyway, you might as well take as many enemies with you as possible. Zekthar did not understand. In Kethrani culture, when a battle was lost, the honorable thing was to retreat and live to fight another day. But this human was talking about fighting to the death. The evacuation ships will not escape, Morrison continued. There are too many void ships and more coming all the time. We need a different solution. What kind of solution? Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy expression. The kind that makes sure this swarm never threatens anyone else. An alarm sounded, and Rodriguez's voice came over the ship's speakers. All senior officers to the bridge. Emergency meeting. They went to the bridge and found representatives from all the remaining ships. Most were humans, but there were also Kethrani and 2 other alien species. Everyone looked grim. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed the entire star system. New Eden was at the center with its sun burning, bright and steady. The void swarm surrounded the planet like a cloud of death. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison said, I have a proposal. Morrison touched controls on the holographic display, and the image zoomed in on New Eden's sun. The star was a normal yellow type that had been burning steadily for billions of years. It looked peaceful and safe compared to the chaos of battle happening around the planet. We cannot win this fight with conventional weapons, Morrison said to the gathered officers. The void swarm is too large, and more ships arrive every hour. The evacuation transports cannot escape because enemy fighters keep destroying them. Zekthar nodded along with the other alien commanders. Everything Morrison said was true. They were losing badly and would all be dead within a few hours. So we are going to try something different, Morrison continued. We are going to turn New Eden's sun into a weapon. The room became very quiet. Zekthar felt his blood turn cold. Weaponizing a star was something he had only heard about in old legends. It was supposed to be impossible and incredibly dangerous. Commander Thex Al of the Regellian fleet spoke up. Captain Morrison, it is against the Galactic warfare conventions. Stellar manipulation is forbidden. Morrison looked at the alien commander with empty eyes. The Galactic warfare conventions do not apply when facing total extinction. Besides, the void swarm does not follow any rules. Rodriguez moved to the display controls and brought up technical readouts. We have developed solar torpedoes designed to destabilize star cores. The process takes approximately 6 hours from initial deployment to stellar collapse. Zekthar stared at the human woman. She was talking about destroying an entire star system, like it was a normal military operation. Her voice never changed. Tone and her hands remained steady as she explained how to commit the largest act of destruction in galactic history. What about the colonists still on New Eden? Asked Captain Veltar of the Kethrani heavy cruiser. Honor's Edged Air Grant answered from her position at the medical station. Current population on planet surface is estimated at 1.4 million. Humans plus approximately 50,000 alien residents. Total casualties will be 100%. She said it without any emotion at all. 1.5 million people would die, and this human doctor reported it like she was counting medical supplies. You are talking about murder, Zekthar said. Those are your own people on that planet? Morrison turned to face him, and Zekthar saw something in the human's eyes that made him step back. It was not anger or sadness. It was something much worse. It was complete acceptance. Yes, Morrison said, we are going to kill 1.5 million people to save the rest of the galaxy from the Void Swarm. If we let this fleet escape, they will consume dozens of other worlds. The total death count could reach billions. Parker stepped forward from his position near the weapons console. Sir, the solar torpedoes are ready for deployment. We need to move fast because more void ships keep arriving, Morrison nodded. Begin Operation Scorched Earth. All ships prepare for immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. Zekthar could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were going to destroy their own colony to kill their enemies. It was the most ruthless thing he had ever witnessed. Captain Morrison, he said, there must be another way. We could call for reinforcements or try a different strategy. Morrison shook his head. Reinforcements would take weeks to arrive. By then the Void Swarm will have consumed New Eden and moved on to other systems. This is our only chance to stop. The meeting ended, and the alien officers returned to their ships. Most of them looked sick and refused to make eye contact with the humans. Zekthar stayed on the Spirit of Liberty because he wanted to understand how the humans could make such a terrible decision. He found Dr. Grant in the medical bay, preparing supplies for the evacuation. She worked with calm efficiency while around. Her the ship's crew made ready for the most desperate gamble in military history. How can you do this? Zekthar asked her. Those people on New Eden are your own species. Dr. Grant looked up from her work. Because if we do not stop the Void Swarm here, they will kill billions more. Sometimes you have to sacrifice some people to save everyone else, but they are innocent civilians. Yes, they are, Grant replied, and they will die knowing that their sacrifice saved countless others. That has to be enough. Zekthar left the medical bay feeling confused and frightened. In all his years as a warrior, he had never met beings who could make such cold calculations about life and death. The humans were not evil, but they were something else entirely. He went to the observation deck and found Johnson cleaning her rifle again. The young Marine looked up when he approached. Scared? She asked. Yes, Zekthar admitted. Are you? Johnson thought about it for a moment. Yeah, but scared does not matter. What matters is doing the job. How can you be so calm about killing so many people? Johnson set down her rifle and looked out the window at New Eden. The planet was still burning from the Iden. Void attack and emergency. Lights flashed across its surface. My little sister lives on New Paris, Johnson said. My parents are on Earth Colony 7. If this Void Swarm gets past us, they might attack those places next. So I will do whatever it takes to stop them here. Even if it means destroying an entire world. Even if it means destroying 100 worlds, Johnson replied. That is what soldiers do. We make the hard choices so other people do not have to. The ship shook as the solar torpedoes launched. Zekthar watched them fly toward New Eden's sun on trails of bright fire. Each torpedo was the size of a small ship and carried enough explosive power to crack a moon. Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers. Solar torpedoes away. Estimated time to stellar destabilization is 5 hours and 43 minutes. All ships moved to safe distance immediately. The human fleet began to withdraw from New Eden, while the Void Swarm continued their attack on the planet. The alien creatures had no idea what was about to happen to them. Morrison appeared beside Zekthar at the observation window. Still think we are wrong. Zekthar watched the torpedoes disappear into the sun's burning surface. I think you are terrifying, Morrison nodded. Good. Maybe that will help you understand what humans are really like. What? Do you mean, Morrison pointed at the planet, where millions of people were about to die. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Ice ages and volcanoes and predators and diseases. Most species would have gone extinct. But humans learned to do whatever it takes to survive. This is not survival. Zekthar said, "This is genocide." "This is both," Morrison replied. "We are committing genocide against the Void Swarm to ensure the survival of everyone else. We will carry the guilt of those deaths for the rest of our lives, but we will carry it because that is the price of protecting our families." The sun began to flicker as the torpedoes burrowed into its core. Deep inside the star, nuclear fires were being disrupted, and chain reactions were starting that could not be stopped. "How long until the explosion?" Zekthar asked. 4 hours and 57 minutes. Morrison replied, "Just enough time to get most of our ships to safety." Most of them. Morrison's face showed the first emotion Zekthar had seen from him. It was sadness, but also something else. Something that looked like pride. Some ships will have to stay behind to make sure the Void Swarm does not escape. They will not survive the blast. Zekthar stared at Morrison in horror. "You mean some of your people will stay behind to die?" "Yes," Morrison replied. "Someone has to make sure none of the Void ships escape the blast radius. If even one of them gets away, it could start a new swarm somewhere else." Before Zekthar could respond, the ship's alarms began to sound. Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers with urgent news. "Captain, we have a problem. The solar torpedoes are not penetrating deep enough into the star's core. Something is interfering with their progress." Morrison and Zekthar ran to the bridge, where they found the crew working frantically at their stations. The main display showed a cross-section view of New Eden's sun, with the torpedoes stuck halfway to the center. "What is stopping them?" Morrison asked. "Unknown energy field," Rodriguez replied. "It appears to be artificial. The Void Swarm must have some kind of stellar defense technology we did not know about." Parker looked up from his weapons console. "Sir, the torpedoes will detonate at their current depth, but the explosion will not be large enough. Most of the Void fleet will survive." Morrison stood in the center of the bridge, and Zekthar could see him thinking rapidly. Around them, the crew waited for orders while outside the battle continued to rage. "How do we get the torpedoes to the star's core?" Morrison asked. Dargrant checked her computer readouts. "Manual delivery. Someone would have to take the torpedoes down in a small ship and place them by hand. That would be a suicide mission." Rodriguez pointed out, "No ship could survive inside a star, even for a few minutes." Morrison nodded. "I know." Parker select volunteers for the mission. Zekthar watched in amazement as every single human on the bridge raised their hand. They all wanted to volunteer for certain death. Even Dr. Grant, who was a medical officer, stepped forward. "I will go," Johnson said as she entered the bridge. "My fighter is fast and has good shields." "No," Parker replied. "This is a job for Marines." "My squad will handle it." Morrison held up his hand to stop the argument. "We will select volunteers based on mission requirements, not personal preference." Rodriguez calculated the best approach to the star's core. As the humans made their plans, Zekthar felt his understanding of their species change completely. These beings were not just willing to sacrifice other people for the greater good. They were eager to sacrifice themselves. "Sir," Rodriguez said, "I have the flight path. The ship will need to penetrate 17,000 kilometers into the star's outer layers. Estimated survival time is 4 minutes. How long to place the torpedoes? Morrison asked. 6 minutes. Parker replied the mathematics were simple and terrible. Whoever took this mission would die slowly, as their ship was burned apart by stellar fire. But the humans discussed it like they were planning a supply run. Morrison made his decision. Parker, you and Johnson will take a heavy fighter with the torpedoes. The rest of the fleet will withdraw to safe distance. Sir, Johnson said. What? About the people still on New Eden. Should we not try to evacuate more of them? Morrison shook his head. No time. The void swarm is adapting to our tactics. If we wait any longer, they might find a way to stop the stellar explosion completely. Zekthar followed Parker and Johnson to the fighter bay. Other Marines were loading the solar torpedoes into a small but heavily armored ship. The torpedoes had been modified with manual triggers, since the automatic systems would not work inside a star. Why are you doing this? Zekthar asked Johnson as she checked her flight suit. Because someone has to, she replied. And I am good at flying in dangerous places. But you will die. Johnson looked at him with the same calm expression she always wore. Everyone dies. At least this way my death will mean something. Parker finished his equipment check and walked over to them. Ready to go, kid? Ready, Sergeant, Johnson replied. They climbed into the fighter and started the engines. Zekthar watched from the bay windows as the small ship flew toward New Eden's sun. On the main display, he could track their progress as they approached the star's burning surface. The fighter disappeared into the sun, and for several minutes there was no communication. Then Johnson's voice came over the radio. It was distorted by stellar interference, but Zekthar could hear that she was in pain. Entering the outer corona now. Hull temperature rising. Shields holding. On the display, Zekthar could see the fighter as a tiny dot moving through layers of fire that were hot enough to vaporize planets. The ship's armor was already beginning to glow from the heat. 2 minutes to target depth. Parker's voice said, Hull integrity at 60%. Morrison stood at the communication station, listening to his people die. His face showed no emotion, but Zekthar noticed that his hands were clenched into fists. Hull integrity at 30%, Johnson reported, still on course. The fighter kept diving deeper into the star. On the thermal display, Zekthar could see the ship heating up like a piece of metal in a forge. Parts of the outer hull were already melting away. Target depth reached, Parker said. Beginning torpedo placement. The radio filled with sounds of strain and effort as the two humans worked to position the massive torpedoes in the star's core. Their ship was dying around them, but they focused on their mission. First torpedo in position, Johnson said through gritted teeth. Hull breach in the cargo bay. Losing atmosphere. Second torpedo ready. Parker added, manual timer set for 30 seconds. Morrison keyed his microphone. Parker Johnson, you have done your duty. Get out of there. Negative, sir, Parker replied. Ship is too damaged. Engines are offline. We will stay here and make sure the torpedoes detonate properly. Zekthar heard Johnson laugh over the radio. It was a sound that made his blood freeze, because there was no fear in it at all. She was laughing as she burned to death inside a star. It has been an honor serving with you, Sergeant, she said. Same here, kid. Parker replied. The radio went silent. On the display, the fighter disappeared as it was consumed by stellar fire. 30 seconds later, the torpedoes exploded deep in the sun's core. The effect was immediate and terrifying. New Eden's sun began to collapse in on itself as nuclear fusion stopped in its center. Then it rebounded in an explosion that would be visible from 1,000 light years away. All ships emergency jump, Morrison ordered. Get us out of here now. The Spirit of Liberty jumped to hyperspace just as the supernova began. Through the rear sensors, Zekthar watched the star explode with the force of 1 billion atomic bombs. They Blast wave expanded at the speed of light and caught the entire Void Swarm fleet. The alien ships tried to escape, but they were too slow. One by one, they were vaporized by temperatures that turned matter into pure energy. The planet New Eden disappeared in seconds, along with everyone still on the surface dot in hyperspace. The surviving ships raced away from the destruction. Zekthar found Morrison in his ready room staring at a list of names on his computer screen. "The casualty report," Morrison said without looking up. "Parker and Johnson are being added to it along with everyone else who died today." Zekthar read the names scrolling past on the screen. Thousands of humans had died in the battle. Each name represented someone who would never go home to their family. "How do you live with this?" Zekthar asked. Morrison finally looked at him. "By remembering that their sacrifice saved billions of other people, and by making sure we never forget the price of victory." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at a safe distance from the supernova. Through the observation windows, Zekthar could see the expanding shell of gas and energy that had once been the New Eden system. The explosion was so bright it hurt to look at directly. "Sensor sweep complete," Rodriguez reported from her station. "No Void Swarm ships detected." The entire fleet was destroyed in the blast. The bridge crew received this news in silence. There was no cheering or celebration. The humans had won the battle, but at a cost that seemed to drain all joy from their victory. Morrison activated the ship's communication system. "All vessels, this is Captain Morrison. The Void Swarm has been eliminated. Begin casualty reports and damage assessments." Over the next hour, reports came in from the surviving ships. The human fleet had lost 7 vessels, completely destroyed, and 3 more damaged beyond repair. The alien ships had suffered lighter losses, but still lost hundreds of crew members. Zekthar watched Dr. Grant work at her medical station. She was compiling lists of wounded and dead with the same calm efficiency she had shown throughout the battle. Her fingers moved steadily across the controls as she turned human lives into statistics. "Final casualty count," she announced. "Human military deaths totaled 2,047. Civilian deaths on New Eden, approximately 1.5 million. Alien military deaths 412. 2,000 human soldiers dead. 1.5 million civilians vaporized." It was the largest single loss of life in recent galactic history, and the humans had caused it themselves. "Medical teams prepare to receive wounded," Grant continued. "Priority treatment for critical injuries. Non-critical cases will have to wait." Morrison left the bridge, and Zekthar followed him to the observation deck. The human captain stood at the large window, staring out at the supernova remnant. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. "Do you regret it?" Zekthar asked. Morrison was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I regret that we had to do it. But I do not regret doing it. The Void Swarm would have consumed dozens of worlds if we had let them escape. Those 1.5 million people died to save billions." "How do you make such calculations?" Zekthar asked. "How do you decide that some lives are worth more than others?" Morrison turned to face him, and Zekthar saw exhaustion in the humans' eyes. But beneath the tiredness was something else. Something that looked like steel. "We do not decide that some lives are worth more," Morrison said. "We decide that we will not let evil spread, if we have the power to stop it. Every person who died today died fighting to protect strangers they would never meet." Zekthar thought about Johnson and Parker flying their fighter into the heart of a star. They had laughed as they burned to death because they knew their sacrifice would save others. "Your species frightens me," Zekthar admitted. "Good," Morrison replied. "Fear makes people careful. And everyone in this galaxy should be very careful about making humans their enemies." A junior officer approached them with a data pad in her hands. "Captain, we are receiving a priority message from Galactic Command." Morrison took the pad and read the message. His expression did not change, but Zekthar noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "What is it?" Zekthar asked. "The Galactic Council wants to hold hearings about our use of stellar weaponry. They are calling it a war crime." Zekthar felt anger rise in his chest. "A war crime? You saved the entire galaxy from the Void Swarm." Morrison handed the pad back to the officer. "Tell Galactic Command that Captain Morrison will be happy to attend their hearings after we finish our patrol of the Outer Rim. That should take about 6 months." The officer saluted and left. Morrison turned back to the window where the supernova continued to expand into space. "They will never understand," he said. "Most species fight wars to win territory or resources. Humans fight wars to solve problems permanently." Zekthar spent the rest of the journey back to base trying to understand what he had witnessed. He watched the human crew go about their duties with the same calm efficiency they had shown during the battle. They cleaned weapons and repaired equipment and wrote reports as if destroying an entire star system was just another day at work. But sometimes he caught them in quiet moments when they thought no one was watching. He saw Dr. Grant staring at photos of the colonists who had died on New Eden. He saw Rodriguez sitting alone in the mess hall with tears running down her face. He saw young Marines writing letters to the families of their dead friends. The humans felt the weight of what they had done. They mourned their losses and questioned their choices. But they would do it all again if they had to, because that was what they believed was right. When they reached the space station that served as fleet headquarters, Zekthar prepared his after-action report. He sat in his quarters with a blank screen in front of him, trying to find words to describe what he had experienced. How could he explain to his superiors that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their minds? They could make decisions that would destroy worlds and sleep peacefully afterward, because they believed it was necessary. He began to write. The human military forces demonstrated exceptional combat effectiveness during the New Eden incident. However, I must advise extreme caution in future dealings with this species. Zekthar paused and thought about Johnson cleaning her rifle while preparing to fly into a star. He thought about Morrison calmly ordering the deaths of millions of his own people. He thought about Dr. Grant calculating casualties like she was counting medical supplies. He continued writing. Humans possess a psychological trait that makes them uniquely suited for warfare. They are capable of functioning at peak efficiency while experiencing extreme emotional stress. They can make strategically optimal decisions regardless of the personal cost. But that was not the whole truth. The real truth was more frightening than anything Zekthar could put in an official report. Furthermore, he wrote, humans appear to have weaponized their own capacity for suffering. They will endure any horror and pay any price to protect what they consider important. This makes them extremely valuable as allies, but potentially catastrophic as enemies. He saved the report and prepared to submit it to Kathrani Command. But first he added one final paragraph. Personal recommendation. Under no circumstances should the Galactic Council ever give humanity a reason to consider us their enemy. They do not fight wars to win. They fight wars to ensure their opponents never threaten anyone again. And they are very good at permanent solutions. Zekthar submitted his report and packed his belongings. His tour with the human fleet was over, and he would be returning to Kathrani space in the morning. He looked out his window at the Spirit of Liberty, docked at the station. A human ship looked exactly the same as it had when he first boarded it. Rough metal walls and crude but effective weapons. But now Zekthar understood that appearances could be misleading. That simple ship was crewed by beings who had burned down the universe itself to keep darkness from spreading to someone else's home. As he prepared for sleep, Zekthar thought about the photo Morrison had shown him of New Eden before the battle. It had been a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. Now it was expanding gas and radiation drifting through. Empty space that the humans had destroyed paradise to stop their enemies. And they would do it again without hesitation if they had to. That was the day Zekthar fought alongside humans and learned true fear. Not fear of death, or pain, or defeat, but fear of a species that had turned necessity into an art form and made peace with the price of doing what was right. He never wanted to fight against them.